And drop a comment if you think you can handle the truth, because this story doesn't just haunt you, it follows you home. The sirens arrive first, tearing through the silence of Blackwood Heights like metal claws. Red and blue lights bled across the frostbitten trees, washing the night in color that didn't belong there. At the end of Old Chapel Road, behind a rusted iron gate that hadn't been opened in decades, police found the body. She was positioned carefully, almost respectfully, kneeling in the snow with her hands folded as if in prayer. Her name was later identified as Eleanor Pike, age 32, a social worker known for her calm voice and patience with the troubled. But nothing about this scene felt calm. Carved into the frozen ground in front of her was a single word, etched deep with deliberate force: purified. Detective Mark Halvorson stood just outside the crime scene tape, breath visible in the cold air. He had worked homicides for 17 years, seen what people did to each other when money, jealousy, or rage took over. This was different. There was no sign of struggle, no defensive wounds, no chaos. Whoever had done this wanted control, wanted a message. Forensics confirmed what Halvorson already suspected. Eleanor had been dead for less than 2 hours when she was found. No sexual assault, no robbery. Her phone, wallet, and coat were neatly placed beside her, untouched. The cause of death came later: manual strangulation. Slow, intentional. Across town, as news alerts lit up phones and televisions, Father Thomas Klein sat alone in the rectory of St. Agnes Church, staring at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. He had known Eleanor. Everyone in Blackwood Heights had. She volunteered at shelters, ran support groups, helped people crawl back from the edge. She was the kind of person this town claimed to value. She was also the last person to meet with Father Klein before she died. Halvorson learned that within the hour. The priest wasn't hiding. He answered the door himself when detectives knocked, his collar crisp, his face pale but composed. He agreed to come in for questioning, without hesitation. To the younger officers, it felt like an open-end shut case. A dead woman, a religious figure, a word carved into the ground that sounded like it came straight from a sermon. But Halvorson had learned the hard way that the obvious answer was often the wrong one. Eleanor had met Father Klein earlier that evening to discuss a troubled man named Lucas Reed. Lucas was 26, recently released from prison, and had been attending counseling sessions Eleanor facilitated at the community center. According to records, Lucas had a history of violence, drug abuse, and paranoid delusions. He believed he was being watched, judged, condemned. 3 days before Eleanor's death, Lucas disappeared. His apartment was found abandoned, his belongings left behind, his car still parked outside. The only thing missing was a leather-bound notebook Eleanor had mentioned during her last session notes. A notebook Lucas claimed contained confessions. Halvorson felt the clock start ticking. As investigators dug deeper, unsettling patterns began to emerge. Eleanor wasn't the first person connected to Lucas Reed to end up dead. 2 years earlier, a prison chaplain who had counseled Lucas was found in his garage, ruled a suicide. 6 months after that, a former cellmate overdosed under suspicious circumstances. Each death had been written off, explained away, buried in paperwork. Until now, the media latched onto the story immediately. Headlines screamed about ritual killings, corrupted faith, and a town hiding secrets. Online forums gave the unknown killer a name before police ever could. They called him the Exorcist, not because of demons or possession, but because of what he seemed to believe he was doing: removing something rotten, purging sins, delivering judgment. Halvorson hated the name. It gave the killer power. It gave a myth. Late that night, alone in his office, Halvorson spread the case files across his desk. Eleanor's calendar, Lucas's criminal record, notes from therapy sessions, heavily redacted but revealing enough. Lucas believed people carried stains that never washed off. He talked about cleansing, about how society protected the guilty while punishing the broken. And Eleanor had challenged him. Witnesses recalled heated exchanges during group therapy. Eleanor pushing back, Lucas staring, silent, his jaw clenched. One volunteer remembered him saying, "Some people don't deserve mercy. They deserve to be corrected." At 2:17 a.m., Halvorson's phone rang. They had found Lucas Reed's car. It was parked behind an abandoned farmhouse 20 miles outside town. Inside the trunk, detectives discovered plastic sheeting, rope, and a pair of gloves soaked in blood. The blood matched Eleanor Pike. But Lucas was nowhere to be found. As dawn crept over Blackwood Heights, officers searched the farmhouse. The building was empty, stripped bare except for the basement. The door was locked from the outside, reinforced with a heavy chain that looked newly installed. It took 3 officers to break it open. The smell hit first. Damp earth, mold, and something metallic underneath it all. The basement walls were covered in newspaper clippings, photographs, and handwritten notes, all pinned in obsessive rows. Faces were circled in red ink. Names were crossed out. Some were familiar: judges, social workers, clergy members. Others were ordinary people, their only crime unclear. At the center of the room stood a wooden chair bolted to the floor, and carved into concrete, beneath it was a list of names. Eleanor Pike's name was at the bottom, but above it were 3 others. 2 were already dead. 1 was still alive. And written next to that final name, underlined twice, was a single word that made Halvorson's stomach drop. Halvorson stared at it until the letters stopped looking like ink and started feeling like a countdown. Morrow wasn't just another civilian. He was a man who decided who lost their freedom and for how long. A man whose signature had reshaped lives with a single stroke of a pen. And 3 years earlier, that same pen had condemned Lucas Reed to 8 years in state prison. Only Lucas had served just under 4. Early release, good behavior, psychological improvement. At least, that's what the file said. By the time Halvorson lifted his phone, the abandoned farmhouse was erupting into controlled chaos. Radios crackled. Flashlights darted across the walls of the basement, illuminating faces frozen in red circles. Men and women who didn't know they were being judged by someone who believed the system itself was diseased. A protection order went out immediately. Judge Morrow was at home when the call came in. At first, he laughed. A short, dismissive sound, like someone brushing lint from a sleeve. Threats were part of the job, he said. Always had been. He'd sent hundreds of criminals to prison over the years. Some of them didn't appreciate it. But then 2 unmarked cruisers rolled into his gated driveway, and the laughter stopped. By noon, Judge Morrow was sitting in his living room under armed guard, his wife pacing back and forth with her phone pressed tightly to her ear. Officers swept the property, checked the perimeter, installed temporary surveillance. Morrow insisted on keeping his afternoon schedule. The officers insisted he cancel everything. For the first time in years, Judge Harold Morrow had no control. Across town, the media was already connecting dots the police hadn't confirmed. A former inmate, a dead social worker, a religious word carved into frozen ground. The nickname The Exorcist spread like a virus across social platforms, amplified by speculation and fear. Halvorson hated it. Nicknames turned killers into legends. Legends inspired imitators. Back at the precinct, investigators worked through the night reconstructing Lucas Reed's movements after his release. He had no fixed address, no registered phone. He floated between shelters, cheap motels, and church basements. Always polite, always quiet, always watching. One thing stood out. Lucas had attended St. Agnes Church regularly for 6 months after his release. Father Thomas Klein's name resurfaced again. This time, Halvorson didn't wait for an invitation. Father Klein sat stiffly across the interview table, hands folded, eyes red from exhaustion or prayer. Halvorson couldn't tell which. He denied any involvement, but his voice wavered when Lucas Reed was mentioned. He believed he was beyond redemption, Klein said. He didn't want forgiveness. He wanted correction. What does that mean? Halvorson asked. Klein swallowed. He believed suffering was necessary, that some people needed to be made examples of. Halvorson leaned forward. Did he ever mention Eleanor Pike? A long pause. Yes. Klein admitted that Lucas blamed Eleanor for softening people who deserve consequences. He accused her of interfering with justice, of protecting the impure. Klein said he tried to redirect those thoughts, tried to ground him. But you failed, Halvorson said quietly. Klein didn't argue. That night, Judge Morrow refused to sleep. He paced his house, jumping at every sound, his confidence eroded by the idea that someone out there had reduced his life to a name on a concrete floor. At 2:41 a.m., one of the officers guarding the property noticed something strange. The motion sensor on the east fence tripped, but nothing appeared on the cameras. No intruder, no animal, just silence. They chalked it up to a glitch. They shouldn't have. The following morning, investigators discovered a package placed carefully at the edge of Judge Morrow's driveway, just outside the security perimeter. No fingerprints. No return address. Inside was a single object, a leather-bound notebook. Lucas Reed's notebook. Every page was filled with meticulous handwriting, dates, names, court cases, therapy sessions, confessions overheard and imagined. But one page made Halvorson's blood run cold. It was a schedule, a timeline, and Judge Morrow's name was circled in red. Below it was a date. Tomorrow. The implication was clear. Lucas wasn't reacting anymore. He was following a plan. As police scrambled to relocate the judge to a secure facility, another discovery rocked the case. Forensic analysis confirmed that the basement in the farmhouse wasn't just a planning room. It had been used. Trace blood found beneath the floor drain belonged to the prison chaplain, who had died 2 years earlier. Not a suicide, a murder. The case widened instantly. What investigators thought was a single killing became a chain, a quiet, deliberate purge stretching back years, hidden behind coincidences and paperwork. Lucas Reed hadn't just snapped. He had been waiting for release, waiting for access, waiting for the right moment to begin his version of justice. And then, just as the net began to close, Lucas made his boldest move yet. At 6:18 p.m., Judge Harold Morrow vanished. His escort found the house empty, doors unlocked, no sign of struggle. His phone left on the kitchen counter, powered off. But taped neatly to the refrigerator was a single piece of paper, for words written in the same careful handwriting found in the notebook. Court is now in session. Halvorson stood in the silent house, the weight of failure pressing down on his chest. Lucas wasn't running anymore. He was escalating. And somewhere out there, a man who believed he was an instrument of justice was preparing his next purification. What no one realized yet was this. Lucas Reed was not working alone. And the next name on the list was someone inside the investigation itself. Chapter 3, Judgment Day. The realization settled over Detective Mark Halvorson like a loaded weapon resting against his spine. Lucas Reed hadn't survived this long alone. The farmhouse, the years of undetected killings, the precision, the patience, it all pointed to guidance, structure, someone who understood procedure, someone who knew how investigations worked because they had lived inside them. Halvorson didn't need long to figure out where to look. The internal review database lit up with one recurring name tied quietly, invisibly, to every critical decision point in the case. Deputy Chief Alan Whitmore. Whitmore was respected, decorated, a 30-year veteran who had shaped policy, men or detectives, and personally signed off on the rulings that labeled earlier deaths as suicides or overdoses. Every time suspicion had flickered, Whitmore had extinguished it. Halvorson felt sick. Whitmore had also been the one to recommend Lucas Reed for early release. The confrontation didn't happen in an interrogation room. It happened in a church. St. Agnes stood silent under a bruised evening sky when Halvorson arrived, squad cars fanning out to seal the perimeter. Inside, candlelight flickered along the nave. The air smelled of incense and old wood. Judge Harold Morrow was bound to a chair at the altar, alive, shaken, bruised, and standing beside him was Lucas Reed. Lucas looked thinner than his mugshot, calmer, focused. In his hands was a small recorder, its red light blinking steadily. Behind him, partially hidden in shadow, stood Deputy Chief Whitmore. Whitmore didn't run. He didn't raise his hands. He smiled. "You're late," Whitmore said, his voice echoing softly through the empty church. Lucas turned slowly, eyes meeting Halvorson's with unsettling clarity. There was no rage in them, no panic, only certainty. "This is a final correction," Lucas said. "After tonight, the list is complete. Halvorsen stepped forward, gun drawn. Let him go. This ends now. Whitmore chuckled. Ends? No, detective. This is the only honest thing that's happened in years. Whitmore explained it calmly, like a lecture. He had watched the system rot from the inside. Repeat offenders cycling through courts. Victims forgotten, consequences softened. When Lucas Reed landed on his desk, Whitmore saw potential, not redemption. Utility. He fed Lucas information, guided his anger, redirected his obsession toward people Whitmore believed had failed justice. Judges who bent, counselors who excused, clergy who preached mercy without accountability. Lucas was never the mastermind. He was the instrument. You used him, Halvorsen said. Whitmore shrugged. He wanted purpose. I gave it to him. Lucas hesitated then. For the first time, doubt cracked through his composure. You said this was about balance, he said quietly. About making things right. It is, Whitmore replied. But balance requires sacrifice. Whitmore reached for his weapon. Lucas moved first. The shot rang out deafeningly in the church. Whitmore staggered backward, collapsing against the pews, blood blooming across his uniform. Chaos erupted as officers surged forward. Lucas didn't resist. He dropped the recorder, dropped the gun, sank to his knees. Judge Morrow sobbed openly as officers cut him free. The recorder became the key to everything. It contained confessions, planning sessions. Whitmore's voice, unmistakable, rationalizing each death, explaining how to manipulate evidence, how to make murders disappear inside paperwork. The case detonated nationally. Whitmore died en route to the hospital. Lucas Reed survived a stand trial. He pled guilty to multiple counts of murder. During sentencing, he showed no emotion. I didn't kill them out of hate, he said. I killed them because I was taught they didn't deserve to keep hurting others. The jury didn't sympathize. Lucas Reed was sentenced to life without parole. Halvorsen returned to work. But something fundamental had shifted. Trust didn't come easy anymore. The system he served had nearly devoured itself from the inside. 3 months later, as winter thawed into early spring, a body was found in a river 2 counties over. Middle-aged male, hands folded, no signs of struggle. Carved into a stone nearby was a single word: purified. The killer was already in custody, but the message was unmistakable. The list had survived its creators. And somewhere, someone had learned the lesson all too well. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe, because some cases never really end.